All right, we have our special guest who's a former Texas Ranger. I don't know if many people know that. They're probably going to know him more as a Seattle Mariner, but it is Jamie Moyer. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want to tell people just a little bit of a story that you might not recall, but it made a big impact on me. My first ever game in the major leagues was Cleveland versus Seattle. And the next day after the game was over, and you might not remember this, but it was the game where you guys were leading 14-2 in the game. I helped get you guys a 12-run lead. You weren't part of that game, but the Cleveland Indians ended up coming back and winning that game in extra innings. And the next day, I'm out shagging baseballs, doing the bucket, and you came up to me and you talked to me for a good 5 to 15 minutes and just talked about what you saw from me, what I could work on. And I was in awe. I couldn't believe that Jamie Moyer was coming up to me and just saying, hey, let me talk to you about what you were doing out there and what I liked it and what maybe you could improve on. So I know I never got to talk to you again, but thank you so much 23 years later for that moment.
Well, I do remember, and I do remember the game. One of my good friends, Aaron Seeley, started that game. And, boy, as far as the game goes, it was just, it kept going downhill. And it was like, it was one of those roller coasters that was off the tracks and you were never going to get it back on. So, yeah, that was a tough one for us to watch. I'm sure a fun game for Indians and Indian fans. And as far as your outing, I don't remember the outing exactly, but when I was asked to do this and your name came up, I was like, oh my gosh, I do remember being at his first major league start. So it's kind of interesting, right? And you know how the lefties kind of stick together, right? So I think my intent there was, I know what it's like to kind of feel like you're out on a boat all by yourself in the middle of the ocean. And that's probably some of the feelings that you were having that day. I've been there myself. So hence to try to give some support.
Now, in preparation for this interview, I do believe Mike Bassick has looked up his statistics against you and your statistics against him.
Now, Jamie, you're not going to remember this, but then a couple years later, we did face off against each other at Shea Stadium. And I knew that I didn't win the game. I couldn't recall what happened. I remember you struck me out, though. And so I do remember that. I battled you to, I think, a 3-2 count and maybe fouled off a couple pitches. It might have only been 2-2, but I fouled off a couple 2-strike pitches. And you jammed me tremendously. I don't know what the speed of the pitch was, probably, low 80s, but you went back inside. And I want you to kind of talk about this I'm not wanting to talk specifically, and you got a hit off of me in that game too, is specifically you were able to make your 80 to 83 mile an hour fastball faster than what the radar gun would say. So I would love for you to explain somewhat of your pitching style and how you could make an 82 mile an hour fastball get by a major league hitter.
Well, I mean, I'll give you the short version because I could talk about this all day and love talking about it. But, it's pitching is, we've heard this time and time again in the game of baseball, location. So regardless of what kind of fastball you have, excluding, in today's terms, where they're throwing 100 miles an hour, guess what? Guys are still catching up to that too. So, whether you're on the bottom end or the top end, you gotta, if you're on the bottom end, you gotta locate it. And the slower it is, I think the more you have to locate it. Movement, is key. Getting the ball closer to the hitter's eyes. Now, obviously under their chin, at their eyes. Yeah, that serves a purpose, but at 83, it doesn't serve as big of a purpose. So when I say closer to their eyes, inside, maybe slightly elevated, something moving down and then off the plate, showing hitters that you can throw pitches to both sides of the plate for strikes, especially with your fastball. And then if you have a good changeup that you can create the same kind of arm speed, and throw a pitch. My changeup I think in my prime was probably about 12 miles an hour different.
Wow.
And I think that's what allowed me, and I could locate it for a strike. I could make it look like a strike out of hand, but when it got to home plate, it wasn't a strike. So again, that's where the deception comes in. And then, having the ability to back it up. And as I got into the game and played long enough, I realized every hitter has an ego. Every human being has some sort of an ego, but in baseball, every hitter has an ego, and some bigger than others. And learning how to play with egos was another big thing too. I throw 2 changeups in a row. Oh, he'll never throw me a third one. Oh boy, here it comes. That kind of thing. Or he won't throw that ball, that same pitch, away again on me. Well, I'll throw it away, but I'll throw it maybe a little further down, a little further off the plate. Learning about the hitters that would be willing to chase pitches off the plate, away, below the zone, down, balls that would be in. Because again, if I recall, back in my era, in my younger era, the major league average velocity was about 87 miles an hour. So I was below the speed limit. And to me, I always believed you had to pitch below the speed limit or above the speed limit.
Did you ever have follow-up conversations with maybe some of the more egotistical players, and they would come back to you and be like, I still can't believe you got me out? And in the back of your mind, like, yeah, I know. That's how I got you out.
Exactly. And I think we've all had those types of, whether they be teammates at the time, they're like, how do you pitch with that crap? Right? or I can't believe, or, I've had teammates, say, I love playing behind you. You work quick, you throw strikes. I don't understand how you get away with what you get away with. And I'm like, well, you gotta, and the other part, it's about the presentation, your mound presence. I had the good fortune when I played with the Rangers to play with a guy by the name of Nolan Ryan.
Yep.
Unbelievable mound presence. And I had the opportunity to play with a guy by the name of Charlie Huff, who had great mound presence.
We love him.
He's a wonderful man. And both of them are. And Charlie had wonderful mound presence and threw knuckleballs. So, having experiences in my younger career, my youthful part of my career, seeing in Texas, again, played with Kevin Brown, played with Bobby Witt, played with Kenny Rogers, all different types of pitchers. During the course of my career, had a chance, playing as long as I did, played with all kinds of pitchers, played with a Cy Young Award winner as a really young pitcher, Rick Sutcliffe. So again, had different experience. And then as I started to mature and understand things, I started to really pay attention to pitchers across the field. A Cliff Lee, Andy Pettit, a Jimmy Key, a Tom Glavine. You start to study those guys. Even though I'm not that person, you can learn by watching. When I played with the Mariners and Jimmy Key would come through a bullpen, and the Kingdom, if you recall, the Kingdom bullpen was down the right field line with no fences around it. I'd go sneak over like I was shagging fly balls in the outfield, and I'd stand 20, 30 feet behind him and watch him throw his bullpen. So, it's just you find ways to try to get better.
And also you rolled out 30 games a year for pretty much your entire career. Is that another thing you kind of peaked on, how guys were keeping themselves healthy too?
Yeah. Well, I think that, look, in that era, if you weren't healthy and you weren't making starts, guess what? They had somebody else. You were probably either on the DL or you were back in the minor leagues, and neither of those places were places you wanted to be. And sometimes it was hard to get your job back if the guy replacing you was pitching well. So, that earnest was on me. The health side of it, I believed. And again, I played in my younger years, I played with some guys that were really hard workers, that were really dedicated. And you hear that about every player that plays the game. I get it. But I also played with some guys that had some longevity, and having the opportunity to watch them do their work between starts. To me, my 4 days between starts, I learned were my most important days. I worked 4 days really hard to get to that fifth day, and that fifth day previous to me allowed me to get to that fifth day ahead of me. But it's what I did. I didn't sit back for 4 days in between starts and do nothing. There was, some video preparation or notes that I would take, weight room, training room, conditioning, being a good teammate, and watching games and learning. It's amazing how much you can sit on a bench and watch a game and you can learn, or you can sit in the stands and watch players individually and learn. There's a lot of non-communication going on in a baseball game, and picking up on that kind of stuff is really important.
Jamie, you got to win the World Series in 2008 with the Philadelphia Phillies. Our Texas Rangers win the World Series this last season. What is it like defending a championship the next year?
Well, it's not easy. You get the target on your back, but still you have to go out and play. And a lot of things have to fall into place. Number one, to win a world championship, as you saw last year, and how wonderful of a season did the Rangers have. And now you've got to kind of put that behind you and build off of it. Again, knowing that your off season was a little shorter, right?
Yeah.
And compared to what you normally have, and maybe focus wasn't there in the off season. So as a skipper, and your skipper seems to have a pretty good handle on baseball and baseball personalities and abilities and successes and failures. So you got a guy at the helm that's been down this slippery slope before. Now it's a matter is getting the players back focused, back on course, healthy. Health is a huge thing, and not resting on their laurels. You gotta again continue to dangle that carrot and create that hunger. And look, players individually and as a group do not want to be embarrassed. So, you want to go out there and work hard and prove that, what you did previously was, what you are as a team, what you are as an organization, and, the microscope that's watching that team gets bigger.
Well, Jamie, I could ask you questions until the sun goes down today. We got to go to break.
The advertisers would get mad.
Is there any way, Jamie, we can give you a call during this Rangers season and talk more baseball to you?
I'd love to. I love talking baseball.
Well, thank you so much. 269 game winner, Jamie Moyer, former Texas Ranger in 89 and 90. Have a great weekend, Mr. Moyer.
You as well. Thanks for having me on.